Sometimes God works through parted seas and pillars of fire. Other times, he moves through palace corridors and quiet courage. This is the story of Queen Esther, a woman of faith and boldness called by God to stand in the gap and save her people. Today, we dive deep into the biblical Book of Esther to uncover how God used a young Jewish woman and orphan-turned-queen to fulfill his purpose. Her story is one of risk, royalty, and the quiet power of providence. This isn't just a tale of ancient history, it's a living testimony of how God raises up women for such a time as this. Even though the name of God is never explicitly mentioned in the book, his hand is unmistakably present. Let us journey through scripture, culture, and history to see how Esther's quiet faith shook an empire. The story begins in the Persian Empire, the greatest power of its time. The Jewish people, scattered in exile, were remnants of a once glorious nation rooted in Jerusalem. Among these displaced people was a young girl named Hadassah, her Hebrew name, known to the Persians as Esther, which means star. Esther had lost both her parents. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai, a man of Jewish nobility from the tribe of Benjamin. Mordecai's lineage traced back to Kish, the same family as King Saul. From the beginning, Esther's life was marked by loss but not by defeat. She grew up not in royalty, but in resilience. And all along, God was watching. This was during the reign of King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Kush. While some Jews had returned to Jerusalem under Zerubbabel, many remained in Persia, adapting to life in a foreign land, yet holding on to their faith. King Xerxes held a lavish banquet and, in a moment of drunken pride, summoned Queen Vashti to appear before his guests. When she refused, she was banished. A royal search began to find a new queen. Beautiful young women were brought from every province to the palace. Among them, Esther. Esther kept her Jewish identity secret, just as Mordecai instructed. She underwent 12 months of beauty preparations, a full year of oils, spices, and rituals. Yet her true beauty was not skin deep. She walked with grace, humility, and honor. Esther 2:15 says, Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. When her time came to stand before the king, he was captivated. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen. This was no accident. God was positioning Esther for a divine purpose. In a foreign court, her story was just beginning. Soon after Esther's rise, King Xerxes promoted a man named Haman the Agagite. Haman demanded reverence from all. But Mordecai, who sat at the king's gate, refused to bow. Mordecai's defiance wasn't pride, it was principle. As a Jew, he would not worship any man. Haman's fury grew. This wasn't just personal, it was ancestral. Haman was a descendant of Agag, the Amalekite king whom Saul failed to destroy 1 Samuel 15. Mordecai, from Saul's line, represented unfinished business. Haman plotted to annihilate all Jews in the empire. He cast lots Purim to choose the date. A royal decree went out, death to every Jew, young and old, on one chosen day. Fear spread, confusion reigned. But Esther was in the palace, and God was about to stir her heart. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and wept in the city. He sent word to Esther, pleading for her to intervene. But Esther hesitated. To approach the king uninvited could mean death. It had been 30 days since Xerxes last summoned her. Then Mordecai delivered these iconic words. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4:14. That single question reframed everything. Esther responded with bold resolve. She called for a fast 3 days, no food or drink for herself, and all Jews in Susa. I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Esther 4:16, she had no burning bush, no angelic vision, but she had faith. God's silence was not absence. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and approached the throne. The king welcomed her. She invited him and Haman to a banquet. At the first, she made no request. She invited them to a second banquet. Esther's wisdom was remarkable. She used timing, patience, and grace. She wasn't just brave, she was discerning. Meanwhile, Haman's pride swelled. He built gallows 75 feet high to execute Mordecai. But God had other plans. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He read how Mordecai once saved his life in the royal records. Haman entered at that very moment to request Mordecai's execution. Instead, the king ordered Haman to honor Mordecai publicly. The reversal had begun. At the second banquet, Esther made her bold plea, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me and my people." Esther 7:3. She exposed Haman's plot. The king was enraged. Haman pleaded, but it was too late. He was hanged on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But the edict remained. Persian law could not be revoked. Esther approached the king again. He extended the golden scepter. A new decree was issued. The Jews could defend themselves on the day of attack. Victory was coming. A day of joy where sorrow once loomed. Esther's name lives on, not just in scripture, but in every celebration of Purim throughout Jewish history. She used her voice. She used her position. She fulfilled her calling. Esther teaches us that God works in silence as much as in signs. Her story is proof that ordinary people can be chosen for extraordinary missions. She was a woman in a male-dominated world, an orphan in a foreign land. Yet she stood up when it counted. Her legacy echoes through generations. Courage is not the absence of fear, but obedience in the face of it. Faith requires risk. Divine calling often hides behind everyday circumstances. Women are not sidelined in God's redemptive plan, they are central to it. Her life whispers to each of us. Esther's story isn't about palace drama. It's about the providence of God. She reminds us that you don't need a title to have influence. You don't need a sign to follow God's leading. And you don't need to be fearless, just faithful. If God used Esther, he can use you. You are seen. You are chosen. You are called for such a time as this. Thank you for watching. If this journey through Esther inspired you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear how God works through quiet faith and bold obedience.